The Talking Turkey Theology podcast begins in 3, 2, 1.
No turkeys were harmed in the making of this podcast. The Talking Turkey
Theology podcast. And now, here's Roger and Oystein.
Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm sitting here talking to Roger, and today we are going to talk about authenticity, the battle for authenticity. And we have touched on this subject before, but today we're going to do it more in depth. So, hi Roger, we're not in the same room, but I enjoy talking to you always. How are you today?
Yes, hello, how's it going? I'm good, thanks. I'm sitting here talking to my friend. It's been a few weeks since we had the last podcast. Like you said, we've touched on the subject before. Yeah. But I think this is an awesome idea that you came with, that we should talk a bit more about authenticity. So we've got a few, I've got a few things to share from my own life. We've got a few Bible scriptures as well that we want to share about that. Yes. We know that authenticity is a tough subject for people today. Also, maybe for, the millennial generation as well. It's maybe harder for them with social media and stuff like that. So
yes,
I mean, I have to admit it's been a tough journey for me, being authentic in my life. I guess I grew up because I'm a Generation X. Basically, I grew up in a time where you basically just had to fit in. And I very much felt that pressure that I had to fit in, even though, I felt that I was maybe a bit different from other people. Okay. I guess a lot of people feel like that, but they're all trying to fit in, aren't they? They're all trying to, and also there's no secret about this. I might have shared it before, but my school time was awful. I hated school. And I think I hated it because of the fact that you couldn't be authentic. It was like you had to fit in, or maybe that's the pressure that I felt at the time anyway. So the pressure was very much, you had to do well at the academic subjects. So things like, language and mathematics, physics, things like that. Those, like, if you were good at those subjects, it didn't really matter about sport. It didn't really matter about art. It didn't really matter about the creative subjects. Because what your parents really cared about was that you came home with a school report saying that you were top of your class in maths, that you were, you were top of your class in English or whatever language that you did. And that was like, okay, yeah. And then your parents will start dreaming about, oh, this guy, he's going to be, he's going to be a teacher, or he's going to be an advocate, or he's going to be a lawyer. That was like the dream for parents back then. They wanted you, because actually growing up in the 70s, there was a lot of economic turmoil. I remember my parents having to pay something like 17% on their mortgage to pay off the house. So it was like crazy time. So I understand the fear back then. I understand why parents wanted their kids to do really well, to get a good job. And that kind of increased the pressure to fit in. And also, like you do at school as well, you want to fit in with certain people, certain like groupings of people, and you do everything to try and fit in to that. You even do stupid things to try and fit in. I remember, being bullied into doing stuff that I didn't want to do, just so that I could fit in with the cool crowd, if you know what I mean. So authenticity has been a tough, even before I was a Christian, it was tough being authentic, and I just tried to fit in, I think, with other people, and in some ways that kind of crushes, or it kind of suppresses what you really are, what God has created you to be, with the gifts and the talents that God's given you. That's just a few thoughts that I thought about.
Well, there's some good thoughts, and You are different, Roger. That's for sure. You're unique. There's no one like you.
Well, thank you. I could say the same about you.
Yeah, it was meant like a compliment.
Thank you. Oh, I take it as one.
Well, I think it hasn't become easier. I think in many ways the world has become a smaller place in a way. It's become a bigger place, but still a smaller place for people to grow up.
Yeah.
Because our world is expanding due to the increase of all the information that we can just tap into and receive from everywhere all the time. So we get all these impressions and suggestions of how you should be and how you could be as a person to fit in.
Yeah.
From social media, from films, from everywhere we go. We can travel more today, and we can travel around the world, and we see all these different expressions of what it means to be a person. And then we kind of wonder, well, who am I in the midst of this? Who am I in the middle of everything that happens around me? And I guess the identity crisis that comes with that is huge. And in a way, I would say that and suggest that culture around us, everywhere, it kind of eats authenticity for breakfast. It consumes who we are if we're not confident in who we are. It can totally just destroy us. And I know that sounds like a really negative thought about, how everything is, but I just see it in my own kids, that they're so fragile in a way that they're so open to impressions from so many sources.
Yeah.
And they have so many questions. And my heart in this is to kind of, how can I help people? How can I help my kids? How can I help other people to navigate in all of this and find this confidence, this sense of knowing on the inside that this is me and that's okay, and that's more than good enough. I have been thinking that this need to fit in, like you're describing, it has to do with our need, and it's a legitimate need to belong. And we have this need to belong, and we all do. But in a way, our need to belong sometimes can push our authenticity away, because we sometimes I think we are willing to let go of a few things about ourselves, about who we are, because we just want to have other people like us. So my question would be then, how can we belong without losing our authenticity? How can we fit in a way, but not letting go of ourselves?
Yeah. I guess if you wanted to relate this to the gospel, then one thing that comes to mind was, be in the world, but not of the world, I guess.
Yeah. Jesus also says in Matthew 11, verses 28 to 29, he says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden. I will give you rest.
Yeah.
Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lovely in heart." Another translation says humble, gentle and humble in heart. "And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." It tells me something about Jesus being a humble person. He's humble in heart. He lets us know that I'm humble. and learn from me, he says. So learn humility and you will find rest for your souls.
Yeah.
So first about this is then authenticity, being who we are, has a lot to do with humility.
Yeah.
Because when I am being humble, meaning that I don't pretend to be someone I'm not, I don't try to be better than I am, then it brings out the real me, the true me.
Yeah.
And when I do that, when I show that to other people, I could maybe even risk that they don't like me when I do it. But when I'm being me and I feel that, I am being real, this is who God created me to be, then I will have this sense of rest, because I don't have to strive to try to show other people stuff about myself that's not really who I am, and I don't have to get their approval all the time. and it comes a rest and a peace with that. And I'm thinking in this context that that's what Jesus is saying. When you are labor, when you are striving, when you're heavy burdened, come to me and learn from me, because I am humble. So you be humble, and you will find rest.
Yeah.
So humility and authenticity, they're a good couple.
Yeah, exactly. And we see in the life of Jesus in the scriptures, in the Gospels as well, his authenticity. You know, God is authentic.
Yep.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
God is authentic. Jesus is authentic. The Holy Spirit is authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, the way he dealt with people, really, I think, really surprised his disciples and the people around him. They were really shocked at some things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for example, the woman at the well, it wouldn't have been normal for a man, let alone a Jewish man, to be talking with a Samaritan and a Samaritan woman for that case. You know, and how he talks to her and how he's being authentic, and he's you know, tells her about her life and stuff, and she just realizes that, you know, this guy, he knows me.
It's true.
You know, that we see his authenticity there as well, how he deals with people. Kind of interesting.
Also, Jesus. The good thing about Jesus, as I read him, when I look at all the stories and how he talks to his disciples, he can be really tough with them, and he can tell them what he expects. But it's a funny thing that you never see him comparing one disciple with the other. He's never telling Peter to be more like John, or John to be more like Peter. He's talking to them in a way that relates to who each of them are.
Yeah.
And I think that is so brilliant, the way he leads. He says, this is where we're going. I want you to follow me, and we're in this for this reason, and I want to achieve this, and I want you to achieve this, but you have to be who you are. And when Peter lets him down, when Peter lets Jesus down, kind of, he denies that he knows him, he comes back to Peter and just asks him, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? But he drew him, he wanted him to come back to his heart and to relationship and say, do you love me? And if you do, go feed my sheep. Go do this that I've called you to do.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, good point about Jesus, the leadership of Jesus, because he actually allowed each of the disciples to be who they are, you know, have their own personality. You know, I'm sure Jesus, he, you know, when they did their like funny, quirky things, sometimes he must have laughed, you know, and looked at, because you know, Father God, he created us. He didn't create us the same. He created us completely different. And that's kind of like a marvel sometimes for me. And I look at my wife or look at my kids or friends and think, okay, how can they be so different from me?
Yeah.
And I think, wow, God, you know, you really did make us different. It's not a cliche. It's the truth. He made us completely different from each other. So in the same way, some of us can be introverts, some of us can be extroverts, some of us, you know, if you know the Myers-Briggs tests, you know, perceiving or feeling and stuff like that, judging, and that's kind of helped me a little bit to understand myself and other people and think, wow, God, you're very creative. God is incredibly creative. You know, when you think about God's creativity, and I'm not sure how this ties to authenticity, but I think it does. When you look in creation, God, you know, just the amount of stuff God has created. When you think of the animals that God has created, thousands and thousands of species, and you can ask yourself, like a real clinical cold person who just thinks figures, business, earnings, could think, why did God create all these things? Because you know, someone could say, what's the point? You know, what's
Yeah.
the point of that?
Yeah.
What's the point of a duck? You know, what's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
point of a dodo, which is now extinct?
Uh-huh.
You know, what's the point in a fox? And then,
Mm,
you know, maybe some person who knows about things says, oh, well, you know, it's the food chain and, you know, they do
mm,
this and it's the ecosystem and all that. And yeah, of
mm,
course, God has created the ecosystem and he's created, you know, some animals to eat other animals. And I think this is amazing, you know, and
mm,
when you look at yeah, this is quite a passion of mine. So maybe
mm,
you can feel that, but
mm.
when you look up at the stars at night and you think
Yeah.
God created the universe,
Yeah.
he didn't just create the sun and like the planets just around us in our solar system. He created billions and billions
Yeah.
of solar systems. And,
It's
you
amazing.
know, we're this tiny little dot,
Yeah. It's true.
insignificant dot. You know, that's God. You can say that's God's humor as well, you know, saying that
Mm.
he created all this stuff just for our enjoyment, I guess. Sometimes, you know, I can fall into the trap thinking, okay, what is my worth?
Yeah.
My worth is maybe in my job or earning and making sure that my family is taken care of. But your worth, and I think this is connected to authenticity. Your worth is what you are, that God has created you to be.
Yeah. It's good.
And you're worth something in yourself. You don't have to be something. You don't have to like
Mm.
project something.
Mm.
You are uniquely created in the image of God. Full
Yeah.
stop. Full stop.
That's
Not because you can do stuff. Not because you have talent or anything else.
mm,
Just full stop. You are lovely and created wonderful in
mm,
His image.
mm.
And just, you know, God saying to us, I created you perfect, you know.
Yes. That's so good. And for me, this is a journey. I mean, I I have pretended so much in so many situations
Yeah, tell me about it.
to be something I'm not, or to be someone I'm not. And I think maybe some of it has to do with I want this approval, recognition from other people, and also some of it has to do with not knowing who I am, like trying to figure out who I am. And so a really legitimate question is, what is it then to be authentic?
Mm,
The confusion sometimes is, well, I'm not really sure who I am and what's really me, and how can I then project that and be real and be true to myself when meeting other people. And for myself, it's been a journey, and it still is, to not figure out, to find out, to discover who I am. And many times I have tried to find that out just in relationship to other people,
mm,
in community, hoping they would tell me who I am, or
yeah,
just being like them, maybe, so that
yeah,
we can have this sense of belonging together.
yeah,
But in that process, I was always striving more
yeah,
than I was finding out who I am. So, learning now, and maybe getting a little bit better, is to not search for those answers mainly in other people, but in my relationship with God. When I have this uh, alone time with God, and that's where I'm going. This
yeah,
time just with me and Him, and there is kind of nothing else that really matters. I can maybe just sit there, maybe read a word, and just sense His presence and His love for me. Just Him being there
mm,
as a good God who knows me and who has good thoughts for my life. Then I find uh, this sense of understanding more who I am.
yeah,
And it's become so important to me because when I have those experiences with God, almost always tell me something about what's in my heart and what my dreams are and what I want to do for other people and for myself, what I want to achieve. And when I know that and I meditate on that, it becomes a confidence when meeting other people.
yeah,
So then when I meet someone, I'm not going there just to let them confirm me or tell me about who I am, but I come with a sense of having something from the depth of my heart that I can actually give to them.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I feel more alive, I feel more peaceful, and it's like coming from another source. It's not just, it's more like, it's authentic, it's real. And trying to learn the difference between what's coming from the depth of my heart and what's just coming from like a thought from another person or something that it sounds good. It's a journey, and I'm eager to walk that journey and learn more about it.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it's also like what you're saying as well is trying to make sense of how can you belong to a community. In our case, a community of God, or any community, like a group or a club or anything like that. How can you belong and not lose your authenticity? How can you belong to that group and give yourself, but not give your full self? Because the temptation for me and for many people, like when you meet someone for the first time, you want to project the best image of yourself. And the temptation could be like to project more than what you are, or the opposite. You can the opposite of that would be like to almost make yourself nothing, saying, I have nothing to give, I have nothing, maybe you're in awe of that person, or maybe you think, okay, that leader or that person, that preacher or that speaker, whatever, they're so good at this, and they can communicate in such a good way, and what can I give? How could I give something that could be important in the conversation or going forward? And then you can you can make yourself smaller than you are.
It's true.
Because the fact is that God has given each of us a special gift, I believe, and that we can give something, no matter how we see ourselves, but that God sees us in another way, that we can give something. True. So being authentic is humility, being humble. Yeah. And I guess my definition of humility is neither making yourself more than you are or less than you are, just exactly what you are.
That's good.
So not being falsely humble by saying, oh, I can't do that, and then turns out you're brilliant at it, so just a few thoughts about that.
It's great.
Yeah.
Another aspect of authenticity is that we're not supposed to use it as an excuse for not being good towards other people.
Yeah.
Because it sometimes it can be a temptation to say that, well, that's just who I am. If I say something that people get offended by, or they don't like what I say, I'm just being authentic. I guess that's the opposite of humility, because it's more like I'm being proud. So in a way, I think authentic has to show itself in humility. And like when Paul says that we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. So that this treasure we have is supposed to shine through us, but it's not we who are the source of the light. It's not we who kind of shine so that other people will be impressed. It's God inside of us.
Yeah.
So that he will shine through us. So then there's nothing to boast about. There's nothing to be proud about. So if we feel that we have to defend ourselves and say that, it's just who I am, I think we're missing the point.
Yeah, true. I think we've all met people that have used that as an excuse for being a bit of a bully, or just bulldozering over other people. Well, it's just who I am. It's just that's just the way I am, and that's not being authentic, is it? So it goes back to humility again. If you're humble, then you're going to think of other people, of their best as well.
It's true. I think from Philippians 4:8 as well, Paul talks about what we should fix our minds on, what we should think about. And it maybe sums up a bit what we've been talking about as well. It says that, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things that are true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse.
Yeah. Mm.
Maybe sometimes we can read these words and feel that we have to pretend all these things. We have to pull ourselves together to be true, noble, and all that. But it's more about filling our minds and fixing our eyes on Jesus, who is true, who is noble, who is reputable, who is authentic, and he's gracious, he's the best, he's beautiful. And when we fix our eyes on him, we become more and more like him. And when he says, learn from me, I'm humble, we can say, yeah, I want to be humble. I want to be authentic. I want to be real. I want to be true. And I think there's this release of energy and freedom that comes with this mindset and this way of thinking.
Yeah, really good. And I just looked it up in the NIV as well. You got it from the Message, which is great. But it also says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is ever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
Authentic and pure, it's all about the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not about fixing everything and doing everything right.
Yeah.
It's about being real when you fail as well. When you don't do it right, it's also about being authentic.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
true,
Yeah.
So we can be true about our failures. We can be authentic with the struggles we have, and it's an invitation to let people love us, even though we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And then we are also able to love other people when they're not perfect. So. And we need that in our communities. We need that in our churches, and the young people today, they need to experience love that is not based on their performance and what they can do or can't do.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you made a good point about failures, because we will have failure in the Christian life, in any life. But I mean, everyone will have failure in the life, and also as a Christian, sometimes we want to shy away from failure because we want to look good, or we want people to think that things are going well all the time. But there will be failure. We will fail. We will fail if we try something. We'll fail at times, and then we'll just we'll pick ourselves back up and we'll say, okay, I failed. And part of being authentic is admitting that you failed. And saying, okay, I failed at that.
Yep.
I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to try again.
Yes. So failure is not an obstacle if we come to God with it and just realize, this is what happened and this is who I am. And I think that one way to keep our authenticity is that we should be quicker to admit our small failures as well. It doesn't have to be, big stuff that's happening and it kind of shakes everything. It's kind of the small foxes that ruins the garden. If I don't deal with them initially, I will let bigger foxes come in and do more damage. So authenticity has to do with being quick to admit and to confess small things that happen, that I know that, I failed here. I didn't do this well.
That's great. Yeah, well, Einstein, it's been good discussing this with you. I think it's maybe created a few more thoughts as well, for future subjects. I'd love to do a subject about failure one day.
We have a lot to talk about then, eh?
Yeah, then that will be a 10-part series, I think.
But hear us right, listeners, that we're not indulging in failure. We're not, praising failure. It's not the point. Our heart with this podcast is to help us grow and to help us be real. And when we are being real, I think we prepare the ground for growth in our own lives and for people around us. So that's why we share stuff, and we share about the need for being authentic. So I really appreciate being able to talk to you about this and talk to you, Roger. I love this.
Yeah, it's been cool. It's been cool today. And also just want to say, if you're listening to this podcast as the first one, and you're curious about some of the things we've been talking about, then go back and listen to some of the other podcasts. We've got some good subjects there.
do that. And if you like what you hear, or you want to let other people have a listen, share this podcast with your friends, and have a comment and like this podcast if you want. We'll say again, thank you for listening, and have a great day, and we'll be back some other time. God bless you.
Goodbye.